My best friend slept with my fiancée. My family called it a misunderstanding. So I burned every bridge I'd ever built and never once looked back. What happened next left all of them with nothing left to say. My name is Joel. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm 31. I work in financial planning at a mid-size firm in Calgary, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was the luckiest guy I knew. Good career, solid apartment in Beltline, a woman I was ready to spend my life with, and a best friend I'd known since we were both 9 years old playing road hockey in the same subdivision in Airdrie. I thought I had it figured out. Turns out I was the only person in my entire circle who actually believed that. My best friend. I'll call him my best friend, because that's what I spent 22 years calling him. Grew up 2 houses down from me. We went through elementary school together, high school, even ended up at the University of Calgary, at the same time, him in kinesiology, me in finance. The kind of friendship where you don't need to make plans. You just exist in each other's orbit naturally. His mom used to call us brothers. I thought that was a compliment. My fiancée and I met at a work event 4 years ago. She was a marketing coordinator at one of our client companies. Funny, confident, effortlessly stylish in that way, where she made it look like she wasn't trying. I was 30 minutes late to that event because of a client call that ran long, and she was standing by the drink table looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. I said something stupid about the canapes being the only reason I showed up, and she laughed, actually laughed. And we talked until the event ended. And then kept talking in the parking lot for another 40 minutes. I asked for her number before I talked myself out of it. By our 6-month anniversary I knew I was going to marry her. I told my best friend first, before I told my own parents. He bought me a beer and said she was out of my league in the best possible way. He wasn't wrong. He met her properly at a group dinner, about 8 months into our relationship. I watched him shake her hand and thought nothing of it. Why would I? He was my best friend. She was my girlfriend. The 3 of us ended up at the same events constantly. Birthday parties, Canada Day barbecues at his cousin's place in Okotoks, hockey nights at my apartment. He was always around. That felt normal. That felt like what close friendships look like. Looking back, I can identify the exact moment something shifted, though I didn't register it at the time. It was a Tuesday evening in late January, about 2.5 years into my relationship. She and I had argued about something trivial. I genuinely can't even remember what. And I came home from work the next day to find she'd gone out. Nothing unusual. Except when she came home, she seemed lighter. Not fixed the problem lighter. More like she'd offloaded the problem somewhere. I asked where she'd been. She said she'd grabbed coffee with a friend from her old job. I didn't question it. I probably should have questioned it. I proposed that March, waited until the last weekend of winter, took her up to Banff for the night, and asked her at the top of the gondola with a ring I'd spent 3 months choosing and almost $4,000 on. White gold, oval cut. The exact style she'd circled in a magazine I'd pretended not to see on her nightstand. She cried. Said yes before I finished the sentence. We called her parents that night, mine the next morning. Everyone was thrilled. My best friend took me for drinks to celebrate. Sat across from me at the pub we'd been going to since university, raised his glass, and said I was the best person he knew. I remember thinking I was glad he'd be my best man. I never actually asked him. I just assumed he knew. The thing nobody tells you about betrayal is that your body figures it out before your brain does. I started having this low-grade unease around the spring. Nothing I could point to, nothing I could name. I told myself it was wedding stress. Pre-commitment nerves. Normal. I kept myself busy. Took on extra files at work, stayed late, started going to the gym in the mornings before most people were awake. My manager noticed and mentioned there might be a position opening at our Vancouver office. Senior planner, significant salary bump, chance to build something from the ground up out there. She said to think about it. I thanked her and didn't give it much serious thought. I wasn't going anywhere. I had a wedding to plan. The afternoon I found out was a Wednesday in late May. I'd left my laptop charger at home and came back at lunch to grab it. 45-minute round trip, I thought. Quick in, quick out. Her car was in the visitor spot of my building's parking garage. Which was fine. She had a key. She came over sometimes when I was at work to use the better internet, or to escape her own apartment when her roommate was home. Completely normal. Except when I got upstairs and turned the key in the lock I heard a voice I recognized. Not the television. A voice. His voice. I stood in the entryway for what was probably 4 seconds but felt like a full minute. The living room was empty. 2 mugs on the coffee table. His jacket on my armchair. That stupid green zip-up he'd had for 6 years. The one I'd made fun of 100 times. My brain started offering explanations. He stopped by to surprise her. She called him over to help with something. They were watching something in the bedroom. The bedroom door was closed. I don't remember walking down the hallway. I remember opening the door. I'm not going to describe it in detail because I don't think I have to. The image is in my head permanently either way. What I will say is that they weren't startled. They were comfortable, That's the part that hit hardest. Not the shock of it, but the ease of it. The way they were positioned like they'd been there before. Like this wasn't new. She saw me first. The sound she made wasn't guilt. It was more like inconvenience. The intake of breath you make when you realize you've forgotten something important. He sat up slowly. Had the nerve to say my name, like greeting me would somehow reframe what I was looking at. I put my hand up. I said nothing. Walked to the kitchen, picked up my charger from the counter, walked back out and closed the front door behind me. So quietly I barely heard it myself. I sat in my car in the parking garage for about 20 minutes. I know this because I watched the time on the dashboard and made myself breathe slowly. Until I could drive without my hands shaking. I drove back to the office, answered emails. Took a call with a client in Edmonton about his retirement fund. Ordered a sandwich from the place down the street, and ate it at my desk and tasted nothing. At 4:30 I texted her, "Get your things out by the weekend, don't contact me." She called 6 times before 6 p.m. I declined all of them. He texted, "I know what you saw, please let me explain." I blocked his number. I told no one that night. Drove home, took a long shower, stood on my balcony in the cold for a while looking at the city, and then went to bed. I didn't sleep, but I stayed there anyway, running inventory on every interaction. Between the two of them I could remember. The way she'd laughed too easily at things he said. The January night she came home lighter. The time I found his jacket at our place, and she said he'd stop by while I was at the gym and they'd had breakfast. I'd never questioned any of it. Not once. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing how long I'd been standing in a room where everyone knew but me. She left a note when she cleared her things out. 2 days later, I found it on the kitchen counter, where we used to keep the little cactus she bought at a farmer's market in Kensington the previous summer. The cactus was gone too, along with the good cast iron pan I'd brought from my parents' house, my Bluetooth speaker, and the weighted blanket I'd had since university. The note was 4 sentences. She said she hadn't planned it. She said she was sorry I had to find out that way. She said she hoped I'd understand, eventually, that feelings aren't always something you can control. She did not say she was ending it with him. I folded the note once and put it in the recycling bin. My parents found out about a week later. My mother called me on a Sunday, and her voice had that specific quality. Too careful, too even. That meant she already knew why she was calling. She said she'd heard from my aunt, who had heard from someone at her book club, who knew the family of a mutual friend. Small world, smaller city than people think. She told me she was devastated for me. She said my best friend had always been a part of our family, and she couldn't wrap her head around it. She said to come for dinner that week. She'd make the roast I'd been eating since I was 8. I said okay. My father was quieter about it. He called separately. 2 days after my mother. Talked around it for a few minutes, asked about work, then said he was sorry this had happened to me, and that if I needed anything to say the word. He didn't offer opinions about what I should do. I appreciated that more than I could say. The dinner was fine until my brother came. He's 4 years older, lives in Lethbridge with his wife and 2 kids, had driven up for reasons I learned later. Had less to do with checking on me, and more to do with a conversation he'd already had with my best friend's mother. He sat across from me at the table, and waited until my mother was in the kitchen, before he leaned forward and said he'd talk to her. Said she was in rough shape. Said my best friend felt terrible, genuinely terrible. And that maybe when the dust settled, the 3 of us could find a way through this. I looked at my brother for a long moment. I said there was no 3 of us. Not anymore. He said he understood that right now, but things looked different with time. He said some version of these things happen. My mother came back with the roast and the subject got dropped, but it didn't leave the room. It just sat there under the conversation like a stone under water. Over the following weeks I learned what I should have predicted. My best friend and my fiancée didn't end. They stayed together, and my family, my parents, my brother, my aunt who I'd been close with my whole life, began a quiet, careful, absolutely infuriating campaign of neutrality that felt indistinguishable from taking their side. Nobody said he was right. Nobody said what she did was acceptable. What they said instead was that they cared about all of us, that this was complicated, that he was practically family too, that they hoped someday there could be healing. My mother told me she'd had coffee with his mother, and that their friendship of 30+ years was important to her. And she hoped I could understand. I told her I understood perfectly. I took the Vancouver position. I hadn't planned to. My manager brought it up again in August, said the timeline was firming up, asked if I'd given it more thought. I said yes. I said I was interested. I didn't tell her why. I gave my landlord 60 days notice, put most of my furniture on Facebook Marketplace, and started boxing up my life in the evenings after work. I told my parents over the phone. My mother reacted like I'd announced a terminal diagnosis. She asked, what about family dinners? What about Thanksgiving? What about Christmases? What about everything we'd built here together? I told her I wasn't leaving her. I was leaving a city that had become impossible to live in, and a social circle that had made very clear where its priorities were. She said I was being unfair. I said I was being clear. It's the difference. My father told me he thought it might be good for me. My brother said nothing for a week, and then texted that he hoped I'd find what I was looking for out there. I left on a Friday in early October, drove the moving truck myself. My coworker riding along as co-pilot because she'd offered, and I hadn't had the energy to decline graciously. We took the Coquihalla. It was raining the whole way through the Fraser Canyon. I felt fine. Better than fine actually, somewhere around hope, some terrible irony in that name. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't even realized was wound tight. I found an apartment in Mount Pleasant. Smaller than my Calgary place, but the building was newer, and the neighborhood was good. I bought furniture that had no memory attached to it. Set up my kitchen exactly the way I wanted it. Started going to a climbing gym 3 blocks away because I'd never tried it before, and I needed something new to be bad at. Vancouver didn't know me. That was the point. The calls from my mother stayed consistent through November and December. She had updates she felt compelled to share. He and my former fiancé had moved in together, into an apartment in Kensington, my neighborhood. Naturally, the wedding was apparently being discussed, but nothing was firm yet. She wanted me to know, she said, so I wasn't blindsided. I thanked her and changed the subject. In January she called to tell me he wanted to reach out. She'd run into his mother at a grocery store in Airdrie, and his mother had said he'd been struggling with the estrangement, that he felt genuine remorse, that he hoped someday. Not now, she clarified, but someday. There might be a door open. I told my mother that door was a wall now, and that wasn't changing. She paused. Then she said I sounded hard. I said I'd learned from experience what happened when I was soft. She cried. My mother is very good at crying at the right moment. I love her and I know exactly how she operates. In February my brother flew to Vancouver. He didn't tell me he was coming. I got a text on a Tuesday morning that said he was at the airport and wanted to grab lunch, his treat. I was at the office. I almost didn't respond. But there's something about seeing a message from someone in your family standing in your city, some residual pull that's hard to explain rationally. And I said okay. 1 hour. We met at a place near my office. He got the pasta. I got soup because I wasn't hungry. He spent the first 15 minutes asking genuine questions about the job, the apartment, the city, whether I was running anymore. Then he put his fork down and said he needed to be honest with me. He said the family was hurting. He said my parents were worried, and that my absence at Christmas had been noticeable and painful for everyone. He said he'd spoken to him, my best friend, last month, and that the conversation had surprised him. He said my best friend wasn't the person he thought he was when he did what he did, and he wanted me to know that. He asked me to just consider, letting him make contact. I picked up my spoon. I said the family was hurting because of what he did. Not because of what I did. He created this. He made the choices that led here. And the fact that everyone was now looking at me to fix the wound he carved. That wasn't reconciliation. That was making the person with the injury responsible for everyone else's comfort. My brother said that wasn't how he meant it. I said it didn't matter how he meant it. That was how it landed. He looked like he had more to say. I told him I needed to get back to the office. Left money on the table for my soup and my half of his pasta, said it was good to see him, and walked out. It was good to see him actually. That part was true. But it didn't change anything. The following April I got a call from my mother on a Thursday evening. Her voice was doing the careful thing again. She said he and my former fiancé had set a date. June, a small ceremony, she said. Just close family and a few friends. And she wanted to let me know that they had asked, through his mother, whether there was any possibility of. She paused here for several seconds. Any possibility of a conversation before the wedding. Not forgiveness, not attendance. Just a conversation. To clear the air. I said there was no air to clear. She said they felt awful. I said feeling awful was available to anyone who'd earned it. She said she'd been invited to the wedding. She said she was struggling with whether to go. She asked what I thought she should do. I told her that was entirely her decision, and I'd have no hard feelings about it either way, which was the truth. What I would not do was give my blessing or participate in manufacturing a narrative, where what happened was a love story instead of a betrayal. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said she wished I could find some peace. I told her I had peace. I had it every morning when I woke up in an apartment that was mine. In a city that was new. In a life that had no performance in it. What I didn't have was tolerance for being asked to make other people's guilt easier to carry. The calls slowed down after that. Not completely but noticeably. My mother and I talked maybe twice a month about ordinary things. Her garden, my work, my niece's hockey. Whether I'd tried this restaurant or that trail. She stopped bringing him up. I appreciated that more than I said. June came and went. I know the wedding happened, because my mother mentioned it in passing, briefly, almost apologetically. I spent that Saturday, hiking the Baden-Powell Trail alone, and then stopped for dinner at a Thai place in North Vancouver. It was a genuinely good day. Then September brought a surprise. I was at the climbing gym on a Tuesday evening, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Vancouver area code. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from my former fiancée. She said she'd gotten my number from someone. She didn't say who. She said she'd been thinking about reaching out for months. She said she needed me to know that what happened between her and him had started before the engagement. Several months before, and that she'd tried to end it twice and hadn't been able to. She said she knew that didn't make it better, but she wanted me to have the truth since she owed me that much. She said she was sorry. Not for how it ended. She said carefully, but for how she'd handled it. I listened to the message twice, standing in the parking lot with my chalk bag still on my shoulder. Then I deleted it and drove home. I didn't want her apology. I didn't want her timeline or her context, or the version of events that made her feel like she'd done what she could. I wanted exactly none of it. And that clarity, knowing exactly what I wanted, and what I didn't, was the most settled I'd felt since that Wednesday in May 14 months earlier. The restraining order came later. And it's not dramatic in the way you might expect. He reached out through a work contact, found my email through LinkedIn, which is frankly insulting as a method, and sent a message that was several paragraphs long and earnest, and deeply self-focused, in the way that apologies often are, when the person writing them wants absolution more than they want to actually apologize. He talked about how much he missed me. He talked about how the friendship was the longest relationship in his life. He talked about regret and growth. And how he was a different person now. He asked if we could talk. I forwarded it to my works department and asked them to flag any future contact from that address. Then I contacted a lawyer friend of mine who practices in Calgary and asked about options. She walked me through what was available. So I filed the necessary paperwork, and that was that. No more contact. My mother called when she heard. She'd apparently found out through his mother. She didn't say I was wrong to do it. She was quiet for a moment and then said she supposed she understood. I told her I hadn't done it out of anger. I'd done it because my peace was worth protecting. And I was done spending energy, managing other people's access to me. She said she loved me. I said I loved her too. That part was easy and true. It's been 10 months since the restraining order was finalized. I got promoted in March. Lead financial planner, new client portfolio, salary that would have felt impossible to imagine 4 years ago, when I was still in my Calgary apartment, circling overtime hours trying to save for that ring. I've got a group of people in Vancouver I've slowly built something with. A woman I've been seeing since February who grew up in Kelowna, and has a very good dog, and the best judgment of character I've ever encountered in another person. My brother came out to visit last month. We went to a Canucks game and ate too many nachos and didn't discuss any of it once. It was one of the better evenings I've had in a long time. My mother and I talked last week. She told me his mother had mentioned things weren't easy between him and my former fiancée. Financial strain apparently. Job changes. The usual cracks that appear when a relationship built on adrenaline and betrayal has to survive ordinary life. She said it with no particular satisfaction. I received it the same way. I don't want them to be miserable. I also don't want them to be my concern. Those two things can exist at the same time. What I actually kept from all of it, was the understanding that the most dangerous person in your life is sometimes the one you never thought to question. The one who's been there so long that his presence starts to feel structural, load-bearing, like if you pulled him out the whole thing would collapse. The truth is when I pulled him out, the thing that collapsed was only the version of my life that was built around people who didn't deserve to be in it. The version that replaced it has better bones,